Hello everybody, welcome to the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council Cabinet meeting for the 30th of September 2020. My name is Councillor Mark Howell. I am the acting leader pending the election of a new council leader tomorrow evening. I'll now move on to the housekeeping points. Please note that this meeting of the Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by myself as chair. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name, as some people may need to dial into the meeting and will therefore not have the benefit of the visuals. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. If you would like to speak, please type RTS, request to speak, in the instant message conversation panel on the left-hand side of your screen and click the arrow button to send. Please note this panel is visible to all parties. If you are able to, it may be helpful to indicate the particular issue you wish to speak on in order to try and maintain the flow of the meeting. If there are any recommendations moved that require a formal vote, these will be carried out by myself as chair, asking for a response of for, against or abstain from each councillor on the cabinet. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Now, if we move to item 1 on the agenda, apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Lewis Allison and all other cabinet members are present. Declarations of interest is agenda item 2. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No. Agenda item 3, confirmation of minutes from the last meeting. I will propose those minutes. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'm happy to second, Councillor Slade.
Okay. Does anybody have any points to make in relation to those minutes? Okay, unless I hear otherwise, I will assume that those minutes are adopted. I'll just leave a second for anybody to object. Okay, those minutes are accepted. Move on to the public issues section, which is agenda item 4. In order to ensure public issues can still be addressed while meetings are being held under the COVID-19 local authority meeting regulations, all public questions, statements or petitions will, whenever possible, be circulated to the Cabinet prior to the meeting, and responses to questions will be published on the Council website and referred to at this meeting. I can confirm that we have received no questions, statements or petitions on this occasion. Agenda item 5, recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. The chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Board has informed me that there are no recommendations he wishes to raise other than the ones on the agenda today. So we now move forward to the substantial items on the agenda, first being agenda item 6, installation of combined heat and power unit at the club at Merrick Park. Councillor Rice will be presenting this report. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Rice?
Yep, Councillor Wilson, I'm more than happy to second that.
Okay, Councillor Rice, I'll hand over to you.
Great, thank you very much. So this paper relates because the club at Merrick Park wished to install a combined heat and power unit in order to deliver savings on electricity, heat and carbon footprint. The combined heat and power unit will be powered by natural gas. And the concept is that by co-generating heat and electricity together, it can achieve an 85% efficiency from the input fuel, compared with roughly around 52% from their current methods. The reason for bringing a paper through Cabinet today, however, is not really to do with the type of combined heat and power unit to be installed, but simply due to the process necessary, since the site is held within the Five Parks Trust and the Cabinet need to make decisions in respect of this land as representative trustees of the Five Parks Trust. The terms of the lease with the council also requires a licence for alteration to allow for installation of the combined heat and power unit. The unit will be contained within a secure, sound and waterproof steel container located in the rear area of the tenant's car park with no loss of open space to the public. Although this additional information is not related to the paper specifically, we have had technical interest from colleagues, and I am grateful for additional information from the managers of the site who have confirmed that they are considering the impact of future technology and energy changes on whatever they install. So, for example, the ability to use hydrogen in the future rather than relying on the fossil fuel of natural gas. Another note in relation to reducing energy usage, again, of course, is the insulation of any buildings. But again, this is not an issue. This is an issue for the tenant rather than for this paper. So I am happy, therefore, to recommend to Cabinet that we accept the recommendations before us. I do just have one technical adjustment for the paper, actually, which is in the summary of sustainability impacts. Paragraph 15, it says the installation of a heat source pump. This is incorrect, and it should be the installation of a combined heat and power unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. I've been informed that there are no recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board in relation to this item, nor are there any members wishing to speak. I think now I'll open up the discussion to the floor for the Cabinet members to speak and pass over to Councillor Andy Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I guess this, as Councillor Rice has introduced, this is very much about us giving the tenant permission to make a change to the way in which they operate. But in terms of the contribution or the mitigation for climate change and our declared climate emergency, it is interesting in terms of how we as BCP wider area, how we as the council influence businesses working within the area, but in this case our tenants, and CHP 20 years ago was a really was a good move in the right direction, but the increase in efficiency is actually quite modest, and the other areas like better insulation and indeed a heat pump which has an efficiency of 4:1 in terms of the energy used would have been a much more ambitious target. So I do hope that if there's an opportunity to work with our tenants on some of those other wider aspects, we could go an awful lot further than I think they are taking with this one step. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. I have nobody. Oh, actually, Councillor Dedman, you were requesting to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to follow up what Councillor Hadley said. And yes, while I totally agree, the technicalities, I'm afraid, passed me by, but I just feel that any small step we make as an administration, which we have vowed to do, and this is our avowed intent, is to if one can do that. I'm sorry, I'm getting bound up in my verbiage here, but I just think that every small step we make should be encouraged, and I really think that Councillor Rice has done a jolly good job on this. So thank you.
Thank you. I have nobody else wishing to speak showing at the moment, so I think we will move to the vote. Does anybody wish to vote against or abstain? If not, we will take it as passed. So nobody is showing, so that motion is passed. We move on to the next item, which is agenda item 7, managing unauthorised encampments, members working group report. This is being presented by Councillor Rice. Who is seconding this item? Councillor Brown.
Sorry, trouble muting there. Yes, I'm happy to second that report.
Okay, Councillor Rice, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you very much. I was pleased to chair the cross-party working group on unauthorised encampments, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the members that contributed. Recent discussions about councillors working together, being respectful of each other and bringing varied views together to find common ground is what I personally appreciated from all members of the cross-party group on this piece of work. It was a difficult piece of work. All of the recommendations in the report were thought about incredibly deeply, with the equivalent of 56 hours worth of councillor time and meetings put into this piece of work with significant council officer and police officer support. This piece of work has been shied away from in the years gone past, but it is incredibly important for many of our residents and the travelling community. It would be easy to pass this off once again. However, the Cabinet had decided that they wanted a cross-party group of councillors to work together and look at what we should do. The group consisted of 3 Conservatives, 1 Christchurch Independent, 1 UKIP member, 1 Lib Dem member and 1 Alliance for Local Living member. This paper was looked at by the Overview and Scrutiny Board with varying opinions expressed, but in general there was an emphasis on good engagement in the future and on trying to create a better solution for all. There was a suggestion from ONS that more consultation was required and therefore to remove option B from the recommendations. However, I can only assume that there was some misunderstanding here because recommendation B is to enable more engagement going forwards, and anyone that was attending the cross-party working group would agree that this was heavily emphasised. There is a lot of detail within the paper, so in summary, if we accept recommendation A and C, then this provides harmonisation of policy across the 3 towns with regards to skip provision, toilet provision and security. And we are accepting a balanced approach to target hardening. All of these aspects were previously different across the 3 preceding authorities, which is why this piece of work was initially started. If we also accept recommendation B, then we are agreeing to the cross-party working group to look at all of the options for additional policy options in consultation with the traveller community, the police and any other relevant stakeholders, and to then report back to Cabinet within 4 months. I am therefore pleased to suggest to Cabinet colleagues that we appreciate the efforts of our councillor colleagues in the working group and proceed with all 3 of their recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Can I now invite Councillor Broadhead, the Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, to speak?
Yes, thank you very much, Leader, and thank you to Councillor Rice for the introduction. It's good that I think I completely agree with Councillor Rice. The working group has been very positive, and in particular, I think the discussion at the Overview and Scrutiny Board really looked at the fact that we are in 2 phases, and we've got phase 1 and phase 2. And I would agree with Councillor Rice that recommendations A and C are very much about the phase 1 and that harmonisation of services and how we are approaching this issue across the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. And I think it's safe to say that there is a kind of a unanimous view that the arrival of the harmonised view is actually a good thing, and that's something that can continue and should continue. And I think the working group's done an excellent job of that. Councillor Wright is right. There was a big discussion on this at the Overview and Scrutiny Board, and it really came down to that second bit, the phase 2, in the what comes next. And there was a feeling from some members that recommendation B, by specifically talking about what comes next and basically looking like you're whittling down 2 options, could send the wrong message. And, you know, if we look at recommendation B, it does say that the working party will now be asked to explore the feasibility of providing alternative stopping spaces and the use of preemptive injunction against trespass, target hardening and management of incursions. So that does look very much like what comes next and what our priorities are going to be. So there was some concern about the fact that does look like we are now deciding the areas we're going to focus on. However, the bigger issue was about the level of engagement, in particular with the Gypsy and traveller community, before we start to whittle down those options. And the fact that they have not been involved in this process, I appreciate Councillor Rice's comments in that that's what comes next. But it does seem slightly at odds to look at where we want to go at the same time as that consultation. There was a really strong feeling that that consultation needs to happen first, and it does seem quite unusual to be whittling down options about something that will affect a part of our community without actually talking to them first. So I disagree with Councillor Rice's statement that this is kicking this into the long grass. I think quite the opposite. There's a collective view that we need to get scripts with this. We need to get scripts with this very, very quickly. And the spirit of the discussion was that we need to worry about this at a later date. But before we whittle down those options that are quite clearly stated in recommendation B, that we do need to do both more work with consulting those that are actually going to be affected by it, and also looking at the combined experience of a number of people that have been dealing with this for years before what looks like we whittle down the options. So that was the spirit of the recommendation. Councillor Rice is completely right. There were views on all sides, and of course this is a very emotive issue, but it's a very important issue. And for that reason, the recommendation from the Obion Scrutiny Board was that we recommend to Cabinet that recommendation outlined in Cabinet Report at B should not move forward for approval by Cabinet. To reiterate, Leader, this is not about stopping this happening. This is about making sure we consult with the people this is going to affect before we make decisions that look like we're deciding on a course of action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Are you able to tell us the balance of votes on that motion in the committee?
Chairman, I don't have that information to hand. It did pass by a majority, as all recommendations that are brought to this Cabinet are. I will accept that there were strong views on both sides. Some people that think we do need to start focusing on the transit sites and the stopping incursions and the preemptive injunctions now, and some people that thought we need to do a little bit more work with consultation first. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We did not have any members registered to speak, but I see Councillor Butt has requested, so I'll let her speak for a moment before we move to Cabinet members.
I'm extremely kind of you, Mr. Chair, to indulge me. I hadn't asked to speak on this, but it has become rather relevant. I support entirely what Councillor Broadhead has brought forward. We really didn't start from the right place. This isn't a time to start from fresh. It is a time to use those past practices and histories from the Gypsy and Traveller, Gypsy, Romany and Traveller community. We mustn't forget the Romanis with regard to how we take this forward. We must use what we have. Huge best practice across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole over the decades of seminars held, and achievements and failings and the way in which we have striven to provide for the Gypsy, Romany and Traveller community. We've taken no evidence whatsoever from people like myself, who would not have wished to have sat on the working party but been more than happy to have come along and given evidence. There are other councillors, I'm talking about member involvement here, who could have come along and iterated that journey for the working party. And finally, we're talking about the most important thing. Since that working group has met, I and others have actually met with the Gypsy, Romany and Traveller community leaders. We've chatted with them and we've really moved on a pace and actually found out where they're coming from. So that consultative process is absolutely key. We cannot fail on that. And if we'd been starting from now with regard to this piece of work again, we wouldn't have started from the same place. So I support entirely what Councillor Broadhead has to say. Please can we take these 3 specific items forward, and can we endeavour to really involve the very people that we are hoping to provide for. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll now bring in Cabinet members. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I don't think this is about whittling down. I think it's about the taking the recommendation from the working group, which was looking at all the options that are available to us in terms of this. It's a really difficult issue, and it's one that creates huge upset for many of our residents every year. And certainly in Poole Town, my ward, we have regular incursions in Poole Park, and this year that included dismantling cars on the cricket green and driving cars all over the cricket pitch, and the cricket club when they left going around on their hands and knees collecting all the bits of broken glass all over the site. And on Beta and in the swimming pool car park, and really inconveniencing the residents. And that's because we don't have a properly controlled setup. The target hardening just moves the problem, as we've found, because we have hardened some targets, and then we find even more sensitive targets get incursion. So we do need to come to a sensible proposal on it. I think the traveller community, the part of the process that's been laid out is to come up with, well, what are the options that might work better? And that's what the Working Party have looked at. And then it is part of the process as laid out in the report, and as Councillor Rice has indicated, to engage positively with the traveller community, because we need to do something that works for them, absolutely, and complies with the law. There are also national changes which we've been anticipating for a very long time, and I think it's really important we don't kick this down the road and we do face it, and that's what the Unity Alliance has said we wanted to do. That's why we set up the Working Party, and I think we should take these 3 recommendations forwards, including very strong engagement with those people affected. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, I listened to the ONS debate, and at the time I was confused, and I have to say I'm still confused now about what they're actually trying to achieve. But I do feel quite strongly about this, because obviously Camford Heath suffers unauthorised traveller invasions every year, and I very much support the need to consult with reps of the Gypsy and traveller community. This always happened in Poole, and should always happen now in BCP, and I think it's the only sensible way forward. But I would also add that there is also a special permanent site for travellers off Yarrow Road, which is managed by Poole Housing Partnership, and it's located now in my Camford Heath ward. Much misinformation is sadly written about this site, usually on social media, how when it was first built that the travellers trashed it. Many still think that it was that the facility actually no longer exists. But the reality is it very much does exist. There was damage caused shortly after it was built, because the council of the day rehoused families that were basically sworn enemies, which isn't a good idea, and the resulting damage was pretty much inevitable. But the council learned its lesson and rebuilt the properties, and is much more careful now as to who is housed there. It's actually a very well-run little community who pay their rent to PHP and their council tax to BCP, and largely keep themselves to themselves. And they are most certainly not a concern for this council, but they actually do need to be included in the list of consultees. Camford Heath does suffer from unauthorised traveller encampments, as I've said, and we get them every year. And we have target hardened the favourite spot at Verity Park by putting in earth buns. But we had an invasion last year at another site, and here the wooden bollards were replaced by boulders. So we've done our best to make sure that Camford Heath is protected, but there is a huge amount of open space across Camford Heath, which makes it an incredibly difficult job, although we have tried. But experience has taught me that there is no easy or simple solution to this problem, which is why I welcome a cross-party working group, because everyone's experience is welcome and everyone's ideas are needed. And there's no right or wrong way to deal with this problem. We just need to try everything in the hope that one day we find something which will work. And I thought that that is actually what the report is recommending. So I would like to support the recommendations as made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm going to be coming from a little bit of a different angle here, because actually I can't agree with recommendation B, I'm afraid, in particular looking at the alternative stopping places. As a Christchurch councillor, Christchurch historically does not have a big problem with unauthorised encampments. They have been successfully managed in the past when we have had them. I have heard it said that we haven't had a problem because there was a site in Dorset when we were part of the county where they could be moved to, but that has only been in existence for a couple of years. And since 2014 up to now, about 6 years, as I understand it, Christchurch has only had around 12, something like that amount of incursions. It is not very many, whereas Bournemouth and Poole have had a whole lot more. nearly up to 100, I believe, in Bournemouth and over 100 in Poole. So that's the first thing. And I keep hearing it said, in the interest of fairness, perhaps there should be alternative stopping places across the whole area now, because we're all as one. And this could be seen as actually bringing issues to Christchurch that we don't actually have at the moment. So I do have concerns about that. Personally, I think that target hardening all round would be better, and I do accept recommendations A and C. I do note as well all the work that has gone into this from the working group, but I also note other comments that we have just had, certainly from ONS. And I'm afraid I do have to agree with those, that I think there should be further, much wider consultation before B is taken forward. Therefore, I actually would like to put forward a proposal that we do remove B from the recommendation, and I do believe I have a seconder. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Who will be seconding that motion?
Yes, thank you. Yes, happy to second. Councillor Leslie Dedman.
Okay, so we now move to discussion on this amendment. I have a number of people waiting to talk on the substantive, well, namely Councillor Slade and Councillor Brown. But if anybody wishes to speak on this amendment, please could they enter into the sidebar now. Yeah, Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit to being slightly confused, because I've read the report of the Working Party, and the Working Party's recommendations were supposed to come to Cabinet some time ago. And one of the reasons that we sent them back was because the Working Party's recommendations didn't include enough options. They suggested that we didn't, that there was no mention of choosing to continue to manage the existing, the way that we do it now. It was recommended that we didn't target harden, and so option B actually puts all of the options back on the table. There are no other options other than manage it the way we do, target harden, get a preemptive injunction, and look at the option of temporary stopping places or alternative sites. So we have all of the options on the table. The idea that we're narrowing it down, I see no evidence of that, because we haven't taken things off. The other thing is, if you actually read the report, the recommendations of the report state that as part of the work, there will be full engagement with members of the communities affected. Under point 26, it's recognised that future works would require input and engagement from the wider council, our partners, including members of Cabinet, ward councillors, planning, corporate comms, community engagement, Dorset Police, Dorset Race Equality Council, and representatives of the Gypsy and Traveller community in identifying and developing any further options. So I can't understand why the removal of option B is going to make this any better. Option B simply says do nothing, harmonise what we've got, target hardening in some places, and keep our fingers crossed. And I don't think keeping our fingers crossed is the answer. If the MPs come through as they claim, we're about to get some legislation and fix this problem for councils, then fantastic. This isn't due to come back to Cabinet for 4 months. So in 4 months' time, I would expect that if Robert Sims and his colleagues claim that in autumn of this year they will have some legislation, then that's what we would be able to consider. But it's now effectively October. We're in the middle of a second COVID crisis. I see no evidence of any of the MPs putting this on the table urgently. And I think that we have to take responsibility ourselves. So I can't support the removal of option B, because option B keeps all the options on the table, and I think all options should remain on the table.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I partly agree with what Councillor Slade has been saying, but I must say that despite all, I am supporting our amendment because of the special circumstances of Christchurch. So that's really all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. I like my colleagues, Councillor Moore and Councillor Slade. Actually, I've come to this somewhat confused from what I've heard. And I listened into some of the overviews and scrutiny committee meeting. Councillor Broadhead and Councillor Batt said earlier they spoke against recommendation B because they felt it seemed to be sort of specifying, what comes next, etc. But I don't agree. If you read the full report and read the details of what the working party came up with, it actually, recommendation B, it talks about going back to the working party to look at the resources and the consultation that's needed to move the process forward onto the next stage and to look at continue to look at the options that we have. And it talks about the consultation. So whereas the Overview and Scrutiny Committee say, they don't support option B, but we need to consult and we need to discuss these things. Well, that's exactly what option B is talking about doing, and it actually mentions about consultation. So actually, if we drop option B, we're dropping what those members have just argued we should be doing. If we drop option B, all we'll be doing is aligning the policy across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole and doing some target hardening. There will be no request for the working party to continue to meet, to do anything, to look at anything. There'll be no request to officers to continue to do any work or to start consultation. So in terms of, the question was asked earlier from Overview and Scrutiny Board about what comes next. Well, if we do what they're recommending and drop option B, nothing comes next as far as I can see. We just align the policies and then everything stops there. And I don't think that at all is serving the residents of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole well, because this problem's been going on for years and years and years. And we need to get a grip of it. Administrations in the past have looked at it, they've had difficult meetings, they've had discussions, and then they've bottled it and they've backed out at the last minute, or they've not pushed ahead with it. And it's just not helping residents anywhere in the conurbation. We need to actually do some real work on this and actually make difficult decisions and move ahead with it, because the previous administrations have just never grappled with it as they should do. And I fear that if we drop option B, that will be it. We will just be condemning the residents of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole to the same old every year. So I wholeheartedly support the main paper, and that's why I seconded it, and I'm not in favour of this amendment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think one of the strengths of the Unity Alliance is that we are a diverse group from across the area, and we do have different interests and different history and different perspectives on the position. And I understand the position of the Christchurch colleagues in terms of their concerns. I think I'm concerned actually if we create a number of stopping places, that actually continues to create issues for a lot of areas around the place. And everyone recognises it's a really difficult issue. It's difficult for the travelling community, and actually to have somewhere where they're not spurned and made very unwelcome is probably better for them as well. So I think it is about how we come to a better balance. But I'm really concerned. I remember the last time this was discussed and effectively just pushed to one side. A number of sites were identified and then none of them picked. And every year it's a major problem. And it also comes back to the provision of things like toilets and skips and other things, and residents going, well, how come at the same time as the previous administration closed toilets for the public, they were providing them for the travellers? So it creates all sorts of bitterness and upset. So I'm really keen that we move forward with this, as difficult as it is, and I don't think we should accept dropping item B for the reasons that Councillor Brown said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. There are no other people requesting to speak. I will just say that as I'm actually represent the same ward as Councillor Hadley, we have over many years had issues with travellers, and it is something that really needs to be addressed at a global level in my view, and working groups are the way to do it. It gives members an opportunity to sit down over extended periods and do proper research, talk to the relevant people, do proper consultation. As far as I read the report, it's the appropriate time to start that consultation. The consultation will go ahead within that working group. Working groups can be challenging. They can end up recommending things that perhaps administrations find difficult, but that's democracy, and I firmly believe that the working group model is the way forward, really, in terms of getting good quality decisions. It will be difficult and it will be controversial, whatever happens, but I think it's important that we progress this. So I see Councillor Rice would like to speak.
Thank you. Yes, it was really just to clarify that if recommendation B is removed, as per the ONS recommendation, then it would just stop all consultation. And so I just feel that there is ongoing confusion here, that we all want more consultation on this, and actually by removing B, that isn't the way to go forwards. So it was just to re-emphasise that and clarify that.
Okay, thank you. I have nobody else wishing to speak, so we will move to the vote on the amendment. So just to clarify, this vote is to establish whether an amendment to remove item B from the motion is going to be supported or not. And I will read out councillors' names in alphabetical order for them to say for, against or abstain. Councillor Brown.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Dedman.
For.
Councillor Hadley.
Against the amendment.
Myself, Councillor Howell, against. Councillor Moore.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Phipps.
For the amendment.
Councillor Rice.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Slade.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Wilson.
Against the amendment.
Okay, by my calculations, that is 7 against and 2 for. Please, could I have the Democratic officer confirm that, please?
Yes, I can confirm that was 7 against the amendment and 2 for.
Okay, so the amendment fails. Now we move back to the substantive. I did have Councillor Slade and Councillor Brown wishing to speak on this. I wonder whether they have said what they want to say or whether they wish to continue, say something further. Councillor Slade has nothing to add. Councillor Brown, do you wish to? No, nothing from Councillor Brown. So we'll now move on to the Councillor Rice wishing to speak.
It was really just to sum up. If there's nobody else to speak. Shall I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Yes, it was just an additional comment with regards to Christchurch. Obviously, in the past, there hasn't been so much of an issue in Christchurch, but just for councillors and members of the public listening, Christchurch was previously part of Dorset area, and they have a transit site, which meant that management was quite different for that area. And so now that Christchurch is part of BCP, this may well have quite a significant impact on the issues in Christchurch. So using a phrase from Councillor Slade, the working party group were much more keen to be proactively looking at all the options and engaging with all the stakeholders going forwards, and not just keeping their fingers crossed now that circumstances have changed. So I am happy to propose that we recommend all three, that we accept all three recommendations from the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Okay, Councillor Phipps would like to speak.
Sorry, it's just a quick clarification that the sort of indicative figures that I gave were, I appreciate, I did mention that Christchurch had been part of Dorset, but that was only, a site was only there for a couple of years, and I don't think it made any difference really whatsoever, because mostly it's a very small site and it was full anyway with travellers from perhaps other parts of Dorset. So at the end of the day, I just wanted to clarify that I don't think that really is of any significance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rice, do you want to come back with something? I know you've put a quick comment on the...
Yes, it was just to confirm that had been in place since 2014. But yes, it is hard to know how much of an impact it has on an area. My understanding from officers is that they feel it has been significant for Christchurch, but with the member briefings that we've had recently with all councillors discussing this, it was highlighted that it would be really useful to, if the working party continues, it would be really helpful to get information from other locations where they have transit sites and temporary stopping places, and that knowledge of how it has impacted on the area since it has been in place was really useful for the working party group to know and be able to influence their decision.
Okay, thank you. I have no more people requesting to speak, so we'll move to the vote. This time we are voting on the original motion, which includes item B. I will again read out each councillor in alphabetical order. Councillor Brown.
I'm for the recommendations.
Councillor Dedman.
Yes, against.
Councillor Hadley.
For.
Myself, for. Councillor Moore.
For the recommendations.
Councillor Phipps.
Against.
Councillor Rice.
For.
Councillor Slade.
For.
Councillor Wilson.
For, thank you, Chair.
So this time that is, by my reckoning, 7 in favour and 2 against. Please, I could ask the Democratic officer to confirm that.
Yes, I can confirm the vote was 7 for and 2 against.
Okay, so the proposal is passed as originally proposed. Now we move on to item 8, Highway Maintenance Funding 2021. The presenter of this report and proposer is Councillor Hadley, and your seconder is?
Councillor Rice, I'm happy to second this, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hadley, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is highways maintenance funding, and this is really the bread and butter of how we keep the highway in good order. But we've had some success in getting some capital funding in from government, which is something to celebrate. So we've had £2.8 million from the pothole fund, which is an allocation based on our size and the extent of our network, which obviously is intended to repair the network. But we've also managed to get £4.1 million in challenge fund for specific major routes. So these are roads that individually would take most of our available monies to sort the one route. It's something that Poole Council previously was successful in getting. So it's one of the great things for BCP that we've managed to get £4.1 million for that. Of course, the maintenance of the highway is an ongoing issue and a bit of a bottomless pit, and that there are some funding shortfalls, particularly as part of taking Christchurch from Dorset Council, because of the way in which that was financed. The amount of money that came over from them wasn't as great per kilometre as in Bournemouth and Poole. Every year there are surveys done. Paragraph 12 details that the annual surveys of the major routes are on their texture, their profile, cracking and skid resistance. And then for more minor roads, every road is done once every 4 years, so 25% done each year. And pavements have to be visually inspected, so the pavements are done on a rotating basis as well. Added to that, when people call in via the report it feature or other ways, the problems of the highway, then that also gets fed into the data as to whether it's enough of a problem to try and redo the whole road or to do patch fixing. And part of that in terms of the patch fixing is that the funding sits with a different directorate, so it sits with environmental services under Councillor Rice, and we've agreed to take £700,000 from the capital investment that's coming in to put to the specific patching under the environmental team, so adding to the amount of money available to them. And the appendices, so Appendix A talks about the pothole fund and the previous Challenge Fund programme, so Challenge Fund 1, Tranche 1 and Tranche 2A. Appendix B details the routes that are covered by the new monies, the 4.1 million that came in under the Challenge Fund this year. Appendix C talks about how the environmental service team, the responsibilities they have and the work that they undertake to maintain the highway, and it also has a funding note which highlights that the amount of money that comes in that came in from Dorset in terms of maintenance is as I said, about a quarter the level per kilometre of Bournemouth and Poole. We've agreed, or we are working to the basis of the same level of standard in Christchurch as in Bournemouth and Poole. So the amount of money coming in is not equated to the amount of work that happens. We're trying to bring the standard up in Christchurch as a part of that work. Appendix D is looking at the environmental impact of the work, and this is a new reporting structure for the team, and they've sort of self-assessed on where there are concerns or weaknesses, and one of those around waste and resource use. And there's been some really good work. I went to see as they were resurfacing the Wallasdown Road. And they were recycling the aggregate back into the road subsurface, and in doing so, that saves about 30% of the carbon footprint of shipping stuff off-site and shipping new stuff in. There have been some challenges through the COVID period in terms of supply chain and having to get things from Somerset rather than more locally. So that's a bit of a challenge. And the natural environment, but this is very much about what is already built. So it's about water runoff and about waste and those sorts of things. So commend the report to Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. There were no formal recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board, and Councillor Broadhead has informed me he doesn't wish to speak, but we do have a member wishing to speak, Councillor Judy Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I was absolutely delighted to see this programme of works coming on board, and especially with regard to a small road in my ward, which is Benmore Road, which is under the Retread Cycling programme. I note, though, there are no costings attributed to these three items, so I'd be grateful to understand why that's the case. I'm sure there's an explanation. A little bit of history with regard to this. This road was created in 1963 unadopted. It was adopted in the early 70s, and basically, speaking to the residents, some who still live in the road, it hasn't been formally completely resurfaced since then. There have been patchworks done and potholes, and it actually enjoys the odd title of being a priority for over 10 years. That's some time frame. So I'm very much hoping that this particular road will be agreed today, that we can go ahead with this and that it will happen very quickly, because obviously those costs which Councillor Hadley has outlined to us, the costs of repair, constant repair, can often outweigh the costs of this new way, this particular new way of road surfacing, which of course is much more green and environmentally friendly. So I would be grateful if the Cabinet will agree to this, and I can go back to my residents and tell them after their huge long wait, their surface is going to be done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. We have a number of Cabinet members queuing up to speak. So firstly, Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I just want to commend the report, really. It was very, very full and very, very technical. And I won't say horrified, because I sort of knew, but I was surprised to read that we had less funding per kilometre than Bournemouth and Poole when we were under DCC. So I'm very glad that that has been rectified. And I'm also very glad that this administration is bringing the standard up in Christchurch to the standard of the roads in Bournemouth and Poole. I think that's a very good situation for Christchurch. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I strongly support this report. I think, as we all know as experienced councillors, highways maintenance is one of the biggest matters of public comment. Everybody seems to have a view on potholes and road conditions. and particularly if they go down a pothole and they damage their tyres. So yeah, I think this is really important, and it's really, really good news that we've got secured an additional 7 million of government funding to improve the roads across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, not just for the residents but for our future sort of revenue funding. By doing a proper job of repairing and resurfacing and dealing with these roads, it will take a lot of pressure off of our sort of regular ongoing patching work, because a lot of these roads are those that do take sort of ongoing resource year in, year out to just keep them going. So I think it's really good news that we're going to get on and do a proper job on this. I did just want to comment that there's a lot of talk, isn't there, in the press and meetings about cyclists and about car users and drivers, and these road maintenance programme is not about supporting car use. It is about all road users. This work will benefit car users. It will benefit cyclists substantially, because they often have real issues with potholes and poor road conditions. And it will support bus users. So no matter what mode of transport you're using on our roads, this highway maintenance programme will support those that use any mode of transport. I think that Councillor Hadley mentioned the Challenge Fund. Yeah, it's really good that we've secured over £4 million here from the Challenge Fund. Poole Council before, I think, secured about £3 million for a number of significant projects, including Magna Road in my ward. So I think the fact that now we're BCP and we've used that experience to secure even more funding across the whole of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole is really good news. And I just wanted to, a bit like Councillor Butt actually, in Appendix A where it lists the roads that are going to be improved, in Appendix A it talks about the grouted asphalt programme, and I just wanted to mention in my ward in Bearwood and Merley, the Shapland Avenue, Weldon Avenue, Finchfield Avenue, Knighton Heath Road, Rycroft Avenue and Venning Avenue. They were previously in the Bournemouth Borough part of my ward, and they've been neglected for many, many years. You speak to the residents around there and you drive on those roads and they are a shocking condition, and they've just been filled, patched, cracks have been filled year in, year out. And that I understand from transport officers that the issue with them is they're historic roads that are concrete based, and it's really difficult to resurface concrete based roads because you put a surface on and it will just break up within months. So short of actually digging out the whole concrete base and building an entirely new road, but I understand that they've been working with contractors to come up with a sort of new technology, new innovative way of dealing with that. So I'm really pleased that they've managed to find a solution, and we're going to be investing significant sums in dealing with those roads. So wholeheartedly support this report.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Well, like my colleagues, I'm really happy to support this paper, and I'm especially pleased to note in Appendix A that part of Sherborne Crescent is included in the resurfacing programme. It is, of course, a shame that local councils must rely on being successful in a government bid to get the money to resurface their roads. Sherborne Crescent, for example, is over a mile long and has to be divided into several sections to help the funding pot go further. One stretch has already been completed a year or so ago, and now we'll get the section of road between Seatown and Hurston Close resurfaced, and they're planning to do the work this half-term week, and I am delighted. Thank you. But that still leaves the section from the junction with the Camford Heath Road to Upline Close to surface. And that, of course, is the bit where I live. So there's no preference here. And I can confirm, though, that the road surface here is not good either. But I do welcome the part of Sherborne Crescent that is being resurfaced. And added to that, there are 2 roundabouts in Camford Heath that are included in the grouted asphalt programme. And that's the big Mannings Heath roundabout, where you have the Camford Heath Road, the Camford Heath Way, Mannings Heath Road and the Dorset Way all meeting up. And it's a very, very busy roundabout. So this work is much needed because the surface is actually quite badly cracked. And there's also the Yarrow Road roundabout on the borders of Camford Heath and the, I think it's Newtown Heatherland ward. And that's also a busy roundabout and in need of attention. So, yeah, I'm absolutely delighted to support this paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just to kind of echo everyone else's comments on being delighted to support the paper. I think the work that's gone into it is fantastic, and it's really nice to see in Appendix B the money that's going to be spent in my ward on Castle Lane West, which is fantastic. So yeah, just really good work by the portfolio holder. So thank you.
Thank you. I have nobody else asking to speak, so we will move to the vote. This item is for recommendation to council.
Sorry, Mark. Councillor Rice want to speak, and I quite like to sum up if as well.
Okay, sure. Councillor Rice?
Sorry, yes, I added that little note in there a little bit too late. You'd already started talking. Thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to say it was a really interesting report, and it just emphasises the detail that goes into looking after all of our pavements and our roads. We have 780 miles worth of roads and another 780 miles worth of pavements, obviously, and it's just an incredibly I'm just very grateful for the amount of work that goes into this from all the officers, and the huge piece of management that goes into coordinating it and prioritising all of this work. There is also a large piece of work that's going to be happening in my ward in Oakdale on Wimborne Road, and I've had residents asking when that phase 3 will be starting to happen, so nice to see that there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley, to sum
Yes,
up.
just in response to Councillor Butt's comment, there is a sum of money, £112,000 for the 3 roads that are mentioned under that section for the retread recycling programme. So that's that. And I guess, in terms of a report of this nature, it doesn't go down to the granular detail. I can't tell her how much is being spent on each of those 3 roads. I think the teams, and as Councillor Rice has just said, the teams have worked really hard on being innovative. Again, as Councillor Brown was indicating, I went and witnessed the team patching a hole down near the SPS camp at Hamworthy, and again that's a concrete road which you looked along it and they've been there so many times patching it up because it's so difficult to do, and we have a backlog of over 1,000 potholes that they're working on. So when people complain about the individual pothole in their street never getting fixed, it is because the team are out there being really busy, and they were affected through COVID. So I think both in growth and infrastructure, with the strategic work, and in environmental services with the tactical potholing, the teams have been working really hard on this, and to be congratulated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's move to the vote. I'll do this by asking firstly if anybody would like to object or abstain. No, so it seems that is everybody's content for that to be passed as unanimous. So we move on to the next item, which is agenda item 9, Christchurch Bay and Harbour Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Strategy. The presenter is Councillor Rice, very busy today. Who is your seconder? I believe that might be Councillor Dedman.
Sorry, sorry, Leader. Yes, I'm having terrible trouble with my cold fingers. I'm going to have to put the heating on here. Yes, happy to second. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rice, would you like to introduce the item?
Thank you very much. So this is the Christchurch Bay and Harbour strategy. So this paper is really about getting the right strategies in place to be able to then apply for central government funding to manage this section of shoreline. In general, there are 3 levels of documents to shoreline management. The top one is the Shoreline Management Plan, which is already in place for this area. The next level down is creating an FSERM strategy, and that explains the techniques that are then used to manage the shoreline. Most of our area in BCP has one of these, apart from this remaining section east of Hengersbury Head to Hurst Spit. Because of the natural geography of this area, the movement of sediment around this bay needs to be thought of as one piece of a jigsaw, and so that is why we are also working with the New Forest District Council as part of the team on developing this strategy document. Then the 3rd level, which is underneath this level in terms of strategy documents, would be an outline business case. and this would then enable us to apply to the Environment Agency to get funding to action this FSERM strategy that we want to create. There were some previous strategies for some of the Christchurch area. However, this was not an FSERM strategy and did not have the approval from the Environment Agency. And so this is why this piece of work was highlighted and prioritised by this authority as needing to be done for this area. The strategy will take around 2 to 2.5 years to complete. There are at least 6 different consultation points where councillors and residents will be able to input into this piece of work. The timing is good for this piece of work because it will also complement another strategy called the Lower Avon strategy that's being developed by the Environment Agency, which is looking at the fluvial changes in the harbour coming down the river. So that goes hand in hand with looking at tidal locking and flooding as part of our strategy. We've had the £450,000 funding confirmed for this project. So if Cabinet agree to go ahead with this piece of work, then it is fully funded. So again, a great piece of work by the council officers, and many thanks.
Thank you. There were no formal recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board, and Councillor Broadhead does not wish to speak. We haven't had any requests to speak from other members, so we'll move to the Cabinet and to Councillor Dedman.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm really pleased to have read this report through, although surprisingly technical. And for one that uses the beach frequently, I just live over from Gundymore, which is the actual local name for Avon Beach. I totally appreciate that this is a piece of work that needs doing. We have always had work done on our beaches, but possibly in a more piecemeal and empirically guided manner. I noticed that it said that our groins are not up to scratch. Well, we do try, and I think we've done a jolly good job. You only have to look at our bit, in a technical term, to see that it's much better than the bit round the corner, i.e. Barton. So I'm always quite proud of what we've done in Christchurch in our own way, but I'm really, really pleased that it's going to be informed in future in perhaps a better way with computer guidance and things like that. And every time we've tried to do something in Christchurch, we've always had a group of the local fishermen saying, that'll never work. So we've got that to come, that they will be saying that will never work, but obviously we hope it will. So yes, I think this is a very cohesive strategy. I'm interested to see that it takes us right round to Hurst Point. And as you say, with the New Forest Council, that will be an interesting piece of work to do, knowing the New Forest Council quite well as I do. So I'm really looking forward to that. So yes, really, really happy to have seconded it, and very pleased with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Phipps.
Yep, thank you. Just putting my video on. Okay, right. Well, actually, I'm very happy with this report. I can see we're looking at Muddyford Sandbank, the harbour, the Christchurch Harbour, the beaches, and also working with New Forest and the Environment Agency, around the coast. Really, really good that we're looking at the whole coastline here with view to continuing to protect it. As Councillor Dedman has said, we have been proactive in Christchurch over the years in keeping everything as under control as we can, and there has a lot of work has been done. So I'm pleased that is hopefully things like that are going to continue. I note it is a long-term project, but I think it's great that we're actually going to get it started, and this is going forward. So I am fully supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, interesting. Better than Barton. This is a partnership with New Forest, and clearly that's really important from a geological perspective. I think the other bit, as Councillor Phipps just touched on, it's a 100-year project. and you know, as a council, we've got to think forward to times way beyond when we're around, and the impact on the communities that live along the coast. And part of that is there are some natural bits that are not defended currently, and some bits that are defended, and the chance of the natural bits sort of side flanking the bits that we have defended. So I think it's really important it's dealt with as one piece. Looks like a great piece of work. The long groin at Hamesbury Head is already being done as part of the Poole Bay work, and everything to the east of that is covered in this. So I think it's good. I'm pleased to see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
I need to get quicker on my retweet RTSs because I keep coming to speak and everything that I wanted to say has been said. But I think that the natural environment is the most important asset we have as a conurbation, and anything that you know, seeks to protect that and to mitigate against the risk of damage to it is much welcome. And just picking up on Councillor Hadley's point, who got in there before me, it is really great to see that this is you know, a really long-term project taking into consideration the next 100 years. You know, I think that's wouldn't it be great if we had an approach like that in all of our strategies? You know, maybe not over 100 years, but much longer term. You know, I think that's really interesting. So yeah, fully support the piece of work, and thank you for the portfolio holder bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Would you like to sum up at all, or should we move to the vote?
Yes, it was just to add regarding Christchurch and the work that they've previously done. Obviously, it has been great, but my understanding is that the funding has come from the local council to be able to do that. So in the future, hopefully, with this type of strategy document, we will be able to get central funding, which then releases those funds for use for our local residents, which is really helpful. And yes, Kieran, is Councillor Wilson, it's lovely to be in the meetings discussing this type of work and thinking about the next 100 years, and taking a long-term view. And I would also agree that it would be lovely if we thought about this in many more aspects of council decision making. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move to the vote. I'll take this by asking if anybody wishes to vote against or abstain. No responses, so I take from that that is approved unanimously. We move on to item 10, flood defences Poole Bridge to Hunger Hill, and this is presented and proposed by Councillor Rice again.
Yes, thank you. Got rather a lot on this meeting.
And I will actually be seconding it this time, so over to you, Councillor Rice.
Thank you very much. So this is the flood defences Poole Bridge to Hunger Hill scheme. This is about looking for permission from Cabinet to go ahead and place an outline business case to the Environment Agency, asking for £12 million from the Defence Grant in Aid funding scheme. This is a scheme to sort out the flood defences in the last remaining section that needs to be done to protect Old Town Poole and all the residents' homes and livelihoods that depend on that area. Recent changes to Environment Agency rules and assessments has actually meant that the mental health impacts that result from a home being flooded and the consequences of having experienced that is now valued economically, and hence, because this is a dense urban area, the business case has changed significantly, and we are now able to apply for the full £12 million that it will cost to build the sea defences here. Compared with when we first started looking at this a year ago, we were thinking we would need to find a £5 million contribution ourselves. So this is excellent. Apart from protecting all these homes and families, it will obviously also help to boost the regeneration of that particular area from the bridge to the Hunger Hill area. The business case is an adaptive approach, meaning that the most important and urgent work is done in the next year or two, but that some of the other work can be done at a more appropriate time, such as 2071 or later. So, for example, some walls can be built to a certain height over the next year or two, but there is no need to build them as high as they need to be in 50 years' time, and they may actually sort of be a bit unnecessary and restrictive if they were built to such a height now. So by having this adaptive approach, they can build height extensions later down the line. That also helps in terms of sea level rises and what's going to happen in the future due to global warming, and we will be able to be more accurate in the future. For the business case, we have to clarify that there will be no ongoing costs to the Environment Agency. So the maintenance of the scheme, which is roughly £330,000, and the extensions that we will be doing later down the line will also be covered by the council. This is the equivalent to roughly £1.1 million over the life of the scheme, so over 100 years, and this will be funded through BCP revenue, maintenance budgets, SIL budgets, and contributions from, for example, the RNLI in that location. As part of this work, it will create a prom around the waterfront in that area, which will be accessible to members of the public and provide an improved urban area, and that is all in keeping with the Poole local plan. So again, another great piece of work, and I am pleased to be able to bring this to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. I do not have anybody showing to speak at the moment, so as a seconder, I'll just say a few words. I think this is really good news for people living in Poole Town Centre. 573 properties are currently at risk at the moment from serious flooding, and it's anticipated that that number would rise over the period that the works are envisaged to 2,000 if they didn't happen. It's also going to, or should assist in the regeneration of the Twin Sails regeneration area. The developers and owners of the sites on the Poole Town side, I understand, very happy with this because it relieves them potentially of some flood risk obligations and will help facilitate the viability of the schemes there. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes, I think I welcome this hugely. I think the extension of the public key is really important, and it's an issue that historically, as on the West Quays site areas, as individual developers have come forward with their plans, there's been a real battle to try and preserve an adequate width of quayside for public use. So I think it's really important that we managed to achieve that. And I think the other thing that's relevant to that is the sea defences that we have on the existing quay actually bisect the space. So it's about how we can influence and how we can make sure that we do make that properly usable by the public as we go forwards, I think is really important. I think the other thing that Councillor Rice mentioned around the mental health, and I was going to mention it in terms of Christchurch, because obviously part of the defences in the previous report we've just heard about is the protection for Christchurch Harbour and Christchurch Town. And so similarly here in Poole, it is a very historic part of town, lots of historic assets and things like the Wool building as part of Poole Museum does suffer from problems with damp. So then there's some real issues about how we preserve our ancient history in the town as a part of that. So I really welcome this development. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nobody else wishing to speak. Councillor Rice, do you wish to sum up?
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. This item is for recommendation. I will take it again by asking anybody if they wish to object or abstain. No, so that item is passed unanimously. If we move on now to agenda item 11, complaints and 2019-20 LGSCO annual report. The presenter and proposer is Councillor Slade. Can I have a seconder, please? We have Councillor Dedman. I think perhaps you might be seconder.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, I can't get my video on, but yes, very happy to second. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll now pass over to Councillor Slade to introduce the report.
Thank you very much for that, Chair. This report is to note the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman annual report and the current position with how we report our complaints. I'm sure everybody's read it, but the highlights really of the report, I would say, are that we have lower than average upheld complaints that were investigated by the Local Government's Social Care Ombudsman, and in all the cases where complaints were investigated and upheld, the resolutions that the council came up with were deemed acceptable and appropriate, which is good news for the way that we've actually responded to those areas where we can improve. Clearly, it's important that we recognise that there is learning to be had from every complaint that comes in, but it is also worth noting that complaints are in an upward trajectory across society at the moment. There's a sort of a bit of a lack of tolerance of other people's behaviour and people's demands, particularly as they've been pent up over the last 6 months, have been higher. So it wouldn't be unexpected to see that in 2020-21 that the number of complaints being made increase. That the most important factor is, of the number of complaints being made, what are upheld and where did the council fall down, rather than criticising any council that's got complaints going up. The other factor that I think is really important with regard to this report, we are obviously a new council. This does have some complaints which roll over from either Bournemouth or Poole Council. There weren't any Christchurch Borough Council complaints that were assessed externally, which is great for Christchurch. But obviously the next report that comes forward will be looking at BCP complaints as opposed to previous council ones that have rolled along. And we are still in a position where data collection and IT systems are inconsistent. New customer service standards are coming in, and having agreed the performance management framework last week, we hopefully will start to see a consistent level of the way that customer service standards are maintained and also complaints responded to. It's been quite difficult, I think, where services are different in different parts of the area for customers to understand what they should be expecting. And officers sometimes working across the 3 towns with actually different responses and different processes, which has made it very difficult for them to manage. So that will have affected the speed of some of the responses to complaints. But in all, it's a good report. The adults and children's reports are separately reported to the Adults and Children's Committee, so that's for them to actually look into in some detail. But this is recommended to note the report, note the position with internal complaint reporting, and I commend the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. Councillor Hadley, were you indicating that you wished to speak on this item, or was that the last item?
No, that was the previous item, Chair.
Okay. I believe Councillor Dedman is typing at the moment, which may indicate that she wishes to speak. Yes, Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you.
Excuse me. Sorry. I should have said there. If I can just stop you for a moment.
After ONS, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. I just should have said that there are no recommendations here from OS and ONS, and we have no member that has asked to speak. So if you could go ahead now, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, this is a very good report, and I think it shows how seriously we take any complaint at all. And I mean, in terms of, it isn't customer service at all, but if it were, one complaint is one too many. I noted from the report, which bears a lot of figures, we had nearly 92,000 calls in. We had 178 complaints in the BCP ASC tranche. But I must point out that we had 275 compliments of various sorts. And I'm not in any way diminishing the fact that we had complaints. As the Deputy Leader says, people now know who to complain to and what to complain about. And I think that's very helpful in terms of taking our caring role forward. And I must say as well that the work is ongoing and very, very strenuously in adult social care and health in order to make sure that complaints are dealt with in a much swifter way. And I think that all in all, I think the report is very fair. And yes, I think that's about all I can say on it. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else at the moment wishing to speak on this item. So I'll just give people a few seconds in case anybody does want to register to speak. But it appears not. So would you like to sum up, Councillor Slade? No, I think you very eloquently described.
I don't really think there's an awful lot more to say. I think Leslie's quite right.
Yeah. So let's move to, well, this is actually an item for information, but I think we are still technically required to have a vote to note it. So I will again ask people if they would, anybody would want to object or abstain on this item. Okay, that again is noted unanimously. I shouldn't have said that, tried to say that word. Okay, agenda item 12, end of year performance reports. This again is presented and proposed by Councillor Slade. And do we have a seconder?
Yes, Leader, Councillor Sandra Moore, happy to second.
Thank you very much. Councillor Slade, over to you.
Thank you for that, Leader. So this is the end of year performance report again for 2019-20, obviously delayed because of the shift back of priorities in terms of the work around COVID. So hopefully the next year's report will come a lot earlier. Also referencing the fact that this report is informed by a basket of measures that were used in the midterm report for last year, which was presented in November of 2019, and primarily either measures that were carried over from legacy councils or measures that the council is assessed on from external bodies. One of the things which was discussed by Overview and Scrutiny Board last November when it came before us at the half-year point was that the automation of these measures is absolutely critical because it allows us to be more timely, and also that some of these measures are probably not the right measures going forward. We didn't have an adopted corporate strategy or delivery plans within 2019-20 that we could use, and therefore you will find that the measures that we use going forward into 2021 will be using those new measures and the actions that were listed throughout the delivery plans that were adopted back in February. I just want to draw attention to a few issues in terms of the tail end of 2019-20 was negatively affected by COVID. We were already having lots of absences and changes to services throughout March, even though the full lockdown didn't happen till towards the end. So, for example, the number of homeless families, homeless households, which are reported in here, are significantly impacted by the everyone in, work, the incredible work that was done by our housing team, because we didn't just have families and households that were known homeless, but people who made themselves known when the rules changed and people were potentially evicted from family and friends who didn't feel able to keep them with the measures that lockdown brought forward. A few things I just want to raise in terms of really good results for which we should be very thankful and grateful to the officers. One is around our delayed discharges from the hospital. That's a really good result. And the other one's around children's services. Whilst there are some areas which are not on target, the fact that we're placing more children in care locally and in local authority placements as opposed to private placements is clearly a great thing, and are now allowing those children to have a better experience and stay within their network with friends and education. The use of our libraries, despite the fact they were closed, has gone up considerably last year, and also something which I'm sure is incredibly important to people it affects, the time taken to process benefit claims are also ahead of where we would expect to be. The other thing to look at the other side of that, there are some concerns in terms particularly around the adult social care and children's sections, which I think can be really accepted on face value. But if you look at the three of the areas relating to adult social care, they relate primarily to residents in Bournemouth who traditionally have been put into residential care, whereas in Christchurch and Poole there's been more work done to keep people in the community, and therefore those individuals in residential care are also then not able to be marked as being in settled accommodation, and they're also the lower likelihood of being in work because they're not living in an environment that models a more of an independent lifestyle. So that is something which, if we can deal with the first problem, i.e. getting people out of residential care and living within their communities, it will have a knock-on positive effect to the others as well. The major issues that I think, if you look at the indicators in the children's services, are primarily around significant change in staff structures, availability of social workers, the changes that we've had with the new Director of Children's Services, and actually what we've been trying to do there, rather than working to targets, is to actually improve the lives of each and every child holistically, and in a whole child situation, rather than actually trying to tick boxes. And I think by doing that, it potentially means that in this first year it doesn't line up where we might want to be, but actually the experience of children is what matters more than anything else. So performance is improving across the board in that area. I would expect those areas to improve, and for next year going forward, we are expecting that these will become digitised. The dashboards will be much easier to work from. Finally, I just want to raise the area of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is something that I was absolutely passionate that was included within our corporate strategy, and really delighted that Bridget and her team were able to cross-match every single one of those 17 Sustainable Development Goals into our strategy. And you can see by clicking on the various links how each of our delivery goals matches in with those priorities. So I think that's a really forward-thinking thing that the council has done. It's not something that all councils have done, and it does put us onto a direction of travel which shows that sustainability is absolutely at the heart of everything that we do. So I hope everybody else agrees that this is a great piece of work, and thanks again to the officers that made it possible.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. I don't have anybody registered to speak at the moment. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee did not make any recommendations, and there are no members wishing to speak, but I now do have some Cabinet members lining up. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a list here of paragraph numbers. It's like I'm ordering a takeaway or something. So I'm just going to I just wanted to talk around a few, particularly in housing. I think we've had some really great success. If I could draw your attention to paragraph 32, to the Turlingmore housing scheme. I think between 19 and 20, we've got £4.3 million worth of Homes England funding that was received to support infrastructure and costs at Turlingmore. So I think that's really good. In that paragraph also it mentions around Nile Court, Sovereign's new housing development at Halls Bay Road, which was open, and that got praised for being one of the most beautiful affordable housing sites in the country because of the views overlooking the bay. So I think that was really successful. At paragraph 33, we have 137 new affordable homes being delivered, which I think is really good to see, but obviously we'd like to see an increase in that number going forward. And at 34, we have the Housing Delivery Action Plan, which was going to be brought alongside a developer forum, which we've since had and has been really successful in engaging with developers and hearing their thoughts and challenges on developing within the conurbation. I wanted to speak a little bit about some of the achievements we've done around homelessness as well under the section of fulfilled lives. Basically from paragraph 69 to 75, there's a whole bunch of successes, but I just want to pick out one or two. I think the launch of the new multi-agency BCP Homelessness Reduction Board has been really successful and really appreciated, and I think that it's that collaboration that has led to much of our success over the pandemic in getting people in off the streets. The Help to Let initiative that was delivered, which secured nearly £500,000 worth of MHCLG funding to encourage landlords to provide affordable homes. Again, this was something that was really useful to have during the pandemic in order to get those affordable homes, into use. And I think one of the key things as well is at number 75. A 37% increase in positive outcomes for those affected by homelessness with significant progress in finding alternative settled homes, and I think that's just really testament to all of my homelessness team at the council. So just to really emphasise that. I just want to speak as well, not to take up too much time, but I just want to speak around a few other outside of my department. I think it's really, really encouraging around the UN Sustainable Goals that they've been incorporated into the corporate strategy so forthrightly. I think there's been a lot of good work around food insecurity, which I think is essential for many of our more deprived communities and has worked really well. The new community food coordinator role that was established, working with other agencies to help fight food insecurity has been fantastic. And the local food banks working with schools to target families who are most at risk of holiday hunger. Obviously, we all know about the campaign from Marcus Rashford over the period of the summer, and I think it's fantastic that we've been part of that. Finally, one just note of caution that I would like to mention is that paragraph 81, and it's around people accessing services for alcohol misuse and other drugs continuing to rise. I think this is something that we will probably see more of as well over the next annual year, because I have read reports around people during lockdown increasing the use and misuse of alcohol substances. So that was kind of a quick run through, but I think it's a really, really, really good report. I really just like to thank my team in housing for a lot of the successes within it, and thank you for bringing it forward, Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Let's move to Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Well, I think this is actually a very interesting report, and it's useful because it's very informative, and the data is well presented with easy to read and understanding, and able to understand RAG ratings. And I don't normally like these sort of things, but this one is okay. I can understand this. It's even got the directional arrows, which most members, including me, find quite helpful. But for me, the section on brighter futures should, I think, be helpful for members of Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny, because it shows the improvement that has been made. And this is improvement that's had to be made despite COVID and all the difficulties and all the extra work facing children's social care, where despite lockdown, social workers still had to visit families to safeguard and protect our children. For me, these guys are really unsung heroes of this council, and I really want to thank them for all the work that they actually put in during a really, really difficult period. And I'm going to make sure that the chair of ONS has a copy of this report to forward on to members. But I just want to thank everyone in Children's Services for all their work. Thank you. And I'm happy to support the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Dedman?
Yes, thank you very much, Leader. Yes, it is a really thorough report. I think it focuses our minds on partly some of the things that we didn't do so well, and in some cases, some of the things we were doing well. I particularly was noted that we are always quite good for discharging people from hospitals. And of course, due to COVID, this is going to be totally different. It is different at the moment, and it will continue to be different. So the next report will probably show something, well, it will be different. I mean, that's all I can say. Whether it's better, I can't say. I particularly wanted to note, yes, it's a bit like going through the numbers. Our number of adults with learning disabilities in employment is not as good as it should be, but I can say that is a real priority at the moment. Of course, now work on it is slightly different, but as the Deputy Leader said, it is partly because we have a legacy of people with learning disabilities in multiple occupation houses, which are not conducive to getting into the workplace. The other thing I particularly wanted to mention, on I think it's 77, an increase in the proportion of people reporting that risks have reduced as a result of a safeguarding inquiry. This is a result of further coaching with our practitioners to encourage them to seek feedback. And I do know from my own email postbag that is so important, that the feedback when you've had a safeguarding inquiry is really, really vital. And I'm really glad that we're making progress with that. And the last thing I want to mention, which is the very, very sad situation of people in our area committing suicide. Our work on suicide, the piece of work on the suicide prevention will be coming to Cabinet in the next months. That's been obviously delayed a little bit due to the COVID situation, but it is being taken very, very seriously. It's a really big piece of work. And yeah, so that's another thing I can report is ongoing and will be with Cabinet hopefully within the next couple of months. Okay, thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I guess this is the first year report, effectively the formation of the council, and the huge work, and it's great at summarising the huge work that's been undertaken under this administration and by officers from the previous authorities coming together. In terms of my own area around transport infrastructure, there's not many measures in the RAG ratings, and that's something perhaps for next year in terms of that. And the Deputy Leader and I have spent some time looking with that area around how we might do some of that. It does highlight in the text some of the key priorities around active travel, public transport and congestion, and the work of the Transforming Cities Fund in doing that. And as earlier items in the agenda, there's a lot of work going on in terms of keeping the wheels on the truck, as it were, in terms of transportation, and we need to make sure that's reflected. But I think, and as Councillor Wilson said, tying things back to the UN sustainability targets is brilliant in terms of our commitment to climate crisis and moving that forward. So pleased to see it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Yeah, I'd just like to say something about my own portfolio, which is economy, regeneration and culture. Again, there's not many measures relating to those areas because it's harder to define measurable targets in the way that it is in some areas. But I'm still very keen that we do develop some targets and measures, and hopefully those will come. This is an evolutionary document and process, and it will be improved year to year. Councillor Rice.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to say thank you for the document as well. Just looking at the sort of an additional thing for next year would be the consideration of carbon footprint. So this would be a real game changer in terms of being able to monitor how every single department is doing and everything, so that we can track our progress and have an idea of what's working and what's not. So this would be about doing the piece of work so that we can actually know our carbon footprint going forwards. Absolutely vital bit of work if we're going to make a significant difference in our carbon footprint. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention was about the recycling rates. Obviously reasonably good at the moment, which is great, but we did have the sort of worldwide representation of images of all the waste on our beaches going around on social media during the summer, and it just highlights the ongoing issue of single-use plastic and our disposable takeaway waste that we're continuing to create, and following on from COVID-19 and all of the disposable plastics that is now being used, and the change in eating habits as well, that were particularly prevalent over the summer in terms of getting takeaway food because we're no longer able to eat inside restaurants. It just had a big impact on that. And so again, another big piece of work to look forward to over the years to come. Thank you.
Councillor Phipps.
Yes, thanks very much. I'm not going to say very much really, but the report doesn't say too much about planning, but what it does say, I just wanted to point that out, is that all the arrows are basically pointing upwards. Major planning applications, minor planning applications and other applications have all been determined on time or almost on time. I just wanted to point that out. And I do know that that department has been working, just like other departments, in very challenging circumstances, with most of them working from home and not being able to come into the office due to government guidelines. So I just want to say that what a great job. Thanks.
Thank you. I think everybody has now had the opportunity to speak. Councillor Slade, do you wish to sum up?
I just really want to say that the next year's report will probably look quite different. I know we've submitted lots of ideas of what basket of measures we want to have in there, so that there is a wider representation on things like, the number of potholes filled versus, the proportion of potholes reported that are filled. Things like, missed bins are things that really bother people. I think there's a little bit of frustration that those everyday things that people see their council tax going on not being reflected in those performance standards. And I absolutely welcome the idea of how we reflect our carbon footprint within the performance measures, whether it's the carbon footprint of the council overall or whether it's broken down further. But I'm sure that Neil Short and the sustainability team will be able to advise on the best way of us being able to reflect that in the paper.
Thank you. The recommendation here is for decision is listed as note the end of year performance and consider the attached exception reports relating to areas of current adverse performance. But I would suggest that we have already completed item 2 there in the context of our debate. So subject to contrary intervention by the Democratic Officer, I think what we are doing here is noting the end of year performance, which is item 1, in which case I'll just see if there was a beep there, so I need to change screens back to see. Yeah, there is a confirmation of that from the Democratic Officer. So we will be making a decision in relation to item 1 there. Again, I will ask if people wish to vote against or abstain. No response, so that was unanimous. Now we move to the last listed item on the agenda, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan at item 13. The latest version of the Forward Plan is available to view on the Council's website, and the next version of the plan will be published next week. But Councillor Phipps wishes to read a statement in relation to an item that needs to be added to the Forward Plan. Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is in relation to the statement of community involvement. And it's just a statement regarding the forward plan, as you say. So basically what I want to say is that following the Council decision to adopt the BCP statement of community involvement with an amendment to require neighbour notification letters to be sent out for planning applications across BCP and the whole area, local planning authority area, I just want to raise some concerns over the financial, environmental and operational implications of that decision. These are as follows. Whilst fully respecting the need to publicise planning applications openly and transparently, the proposal to notify by site notice only has been carefully considered as being the best approach for the Council in view of the current financial and practical restrictions resulting from the ongoing pandemic. It's surprising that the amendment was not raised previously when it was being considered by ONS and then at Cabinet. The decision at Council to reintroduce letters now needs further consideration in terms of the financial impacts before implementation. As set out in the Council papers, going to a system of site notices would have realised a saving of around £14,000 to £18,000 from reduction in postage, paper and ink costs that had been factored into this year's COVID-19 financial budget response, which can no longer be taken and therefore needs to be acknowledged as a pressure. Adding the requirement to send letters in Bournemouth after 20 years of using site notices only will likely create an additional pressure of around £10,000 per annum. Taken together and with the Council's current financial pressures, there is no available funding in the existing planning budgets to pay for the additional costs arising from the decision, and additional funding will need to be made available. Also, there is the issue of extra officer time involved by having to send letters out in Bournemouth. Staff resources are already severely stretched, and in the absence of employing additional staff to send out letters, the process will have to be absorbed into existing officer time at present. And this will likely mean other activities in the planning department will be slowed down by having to allocate more staff time to producing and sending out letters. There will also be a greater requirement to have staff in the office to produce letters at a time when the government is telling us to work from home. A resource and process plan is needed in order to ensure letters can be sent out without impacting on the current service. The Council has declared a climate emergency, and the reduction in use of letters would have had an environmental benefit by reducing materials used, so a reappraisal of environmental impacts alongside financial and operational issues should be undertaken. So, therefore, for the reasons I have set out, it is advised that the Council's decision is referred for further detailed consideration to the next Cabinet meeting before the statement of community involvement is effected, with an updated report on how the decision to send out letters across BCP as a whole will be resourced and implemented at the present time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. Well, that concludes the agenda items today, but I've had a request from Councillor Slade to make, she wishes to make a statement.
Thank you,
Councillor.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak, Chair. I just wanted to state that Cabinet's now been meeting in its current form for almost a year and a half, and the portfolios were created at the inception of the administration from a complete standing start and sort of designed on paper prior to us delivering a corporate strategy and priorities for the council. As you all know, there is a vote tomorrow for a new leader of the council, and in the event of a change of administration will inevitably lead to a very different looking cabinet. I just want to put it on record that although I've already expressed my intention to review the membership of the cabinet under my leadership, I now want to confirm that it would be my intention not just to review the members of the cabinet, but also the shape and portfolios of the cabinet, to treat these also as an interim arrangement with the intention to look very closely at moving the council towards a committee scheme. I'm really conscious that many people have felt that the cabinet arrangement can appear to be exclusive and drives people to feel that they don't have a voice. We have worked really hard in the last year and a half to make sure that every single member of the council who wishes to engage in cabinet is enabled to do so. But despite that, the decision making does still sit within the hands of a small number of people. So I want to put it on record that that is a commitment that we would do that should the Unity Alliance remain in administration after tomorrow night. And just to finish by saying how grateful I am, and I know the rest of the Cabinet are, to the team in Democratic Services for helping us to run Cabinet so well, for enabling us to be so inclusive and to put real time and effort into making sure that these Cabinet meetings are watched by so many people, and to thank all of the senior officers for giving us their support every single month in making sure that these are delivered well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slade. I'd like to echo those thanks on behalf of the Cabinet. It's been extremely challenging for officers in terms of getting us up running online. And I'd also like to thank all of you who are listening. This has been, I think, a very good exercise in transparency and enabling the public to see more of how council operates and to experience the decision-making process. So thank you again. And I'd now like to formally close the meeting.